This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, not broadcasting from the beautiful west side of Oahu. No, I am broadcasting from the hill country of Texas. More to come on that, but I just want to get to it. When I was on a plane flying from Texas to Hawaii, while I was in the air, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, called Saint Damian of Molokai an instrument of white supremacy. My first thought is, white supremacists should issue a press statement thanking AOC for such kind words. And my second thought is, I need to immediately respond to this on the Jason Jones Show and have on my good friend, Hawaiian activist, diocesan catechist, and Catholic educator, Dallas Carter, on to respond. And although I am not on the beautiful island of Oahu, Dallas is, and his name is Dallas. I should have asked him about that. Dallas is. He's been quoted. He's been interviewed. Reporters from all over the world have reached out to Dallas for comment. You've probably read some of his comments in publications if you're at all familiar with the story. But to me, AOC attacking Saint Damian, and I'm going to write an article about it this week, is the battle between victimism and true Christian solidarity. AOC is on team victimist, team feigning concern for the vulnerable to gain wealth, power, and prestige. And Saint Damian is on team Christian solidarity. Real sacrifice where you become indistinguishable between between yourself and those who you are serving. You become as vulnerable as they are. That's what Christian solidarity is. Victimism is you, quote unquote, represent a marginal community, and through your courage of representing this community, you become really rich, famous, and powerful. And Saint Damian, in his true act of Christian love, gets leprosy and dies. But of course, AOC calls him an instrument of white supremacy. So we talk with Dallas Carter and we get his take on this. And he begins with a response in Hawaiian. So I'm so grateful that the Hawaiian language will be heard through this podcast all over the world. Okay? This episode has been brought to you by Movie to Movement, creating a culture of life, love, and beauty through the power of film. Go to our website, movietomovement.com, and check out our new movie, Divided Hearts of America. We are signing a distribution deal this week, and soon I will be able to tell you how you are going to see it. So go to movietomovement.com, check out Divided Hearts of America. An interview with Dallas Carter on Saint Damian, instrument of white supremacy. It's the Jason Jones Show. Aloha, Dallas Carter. Welcome to the show.
Aloha.
So, brother, you are a dear friend. You've been on the show before, and you are a very close friend. And I have the podcast for things like this, what just happened this week. I couldn't believe it. I'm on a plane over the Pacific Ocean, and when I land in Dallas, I hear the most incredible statement from AOC from New York, from Queens. Why she's making statements about Hawaii, I know not. But she said that Saint Damian of Molokai was a symbol of white supremacy. And my first thought was, I'm so glad I have a podcast. I'm so glad Dallas Carter is my friend. I have to get him on the air to respond to this. So that's what today's interview is going to be. But I know there's something you wanted to say even before we got on with the interview.
Yeah, no, for sure. Ano ay avilina in ho makamaka Obao Dallas mahalo ya oi e Jason no kiia manava, no ku manava, a me ke ia kama ilio pili ana ke kahi kanaka kui kawao, o ia hoi kamiano, he kanaka kui kawao no ka po'e Hawaii no ka mea, he kahu hemolele o ia, ua nui kona aloha no ka po'e Hawaii, na kanaka mai, a me na kanaka Hawaii a pau. So mahalo ia oe no ke ia manava, a me ke ia kama ilio. That's it. I just said thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on air to discuss someone that's so special to me and to the Hawaiian people. Damien, Father Damien, Saint Damian, someone that the Hawaiians refer to as Kamiano. And I want to share today the great love that all Hawaiian people, Catholic or not Catholic, Christian or not Christian, all Hawaiian people and a vast majority of the people who live in Hawaii, period, even today, love. I want to share the love that we have for him because of the love he had for us. And I think the world needs to hear that and set the record straight.
Well, I'm glad that you got to say that in Hawaiian, and that's a language that Saint Damian learned, didn't he?
That's right. Yes, that's absolutely right. He's the only, from the Catholic perspective, it's important to know that he is the only priest saint in the Roman martyrology that spoke Hawaiian. And that is an amazing thing that makes him near and dear to the heart of every Hawaiian, both Catholic and non-Catholic Christians.
So you are a catechist, a diocesan catechist for the Diocese of Honolulu. You are an educator, a school teacher, an apologist, and you are a Hawaiian rights activist. So
yes.
This statement offended you at every level, I have to imagine?
Absolutely. And I what I hope to kind of reveal, I want to reveal the different layers of the offense that we took. I mean, it was anything negative being said about Damien off the bat is absolutely ridiculous. And I want to cover that, but I think that's going to be crushed pretty easily. I want to go even deeper into the other aspects of the statement that was made and how it really infuriated, even Hawaiians that otherwise support AOC. So we can talk about that as we move forward.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I couldn't think of two people more diametrically opposed because I look at AOC as a classic victimist, someone who feigns concern for the vulnerable, for power, for prestige, for wealth. She gets Netflix deals, books deals, gets elected to office, all while proclaiming that she's standing for the vulnerable. Then you have
right.
Saint Damian, and I always am quoting Rene Girard, where he said to be in solidarity with the vulnerable is to become indistinguishable from the vulnerable. And Saint Damian, to me, is the perfect example of that, in that he went to serve a community suffering from leprosy, and he himself then dies from leprosy. To me, that is the perfect example of true solidarity.
Right, and I wonder if any of these politicians, any of them that like to rally up victimization, the ones that love to play on the needs of those who truly are vulnerable, I wonder if any of them, and I'm not calling on any one individual, but I wonder if any of them have the genuine virtue to do what some of these great saints do. You can say all you want on Instagram or on Facebook or Twitter, but would you be willing to be with those people and die for those people, be in true solidarity with them? I'm still waiting for a politician that fits that bill, and I just don't believe it exists on the left or the right, brother.
Well, maybe. I think you might be right. Can you tell everyone about Saint Damian, where he came from, how he ended up in the Kingdom of Hawaii, how important his statue is,
sure. For sure. So Father Damien is a Sacred Heart's priest, and he actually came to Hawaii, which people don't realize. He came to Hawaii a little bit before he was sent to Kalaupapa. He actually arrived in 1864, and he wasn't yet a priest. He actually had to finish up his studies here, and then at our still standing Cathedral Basilica, he was ordained on the 21st of May in 1864. And his first mission, which I'm very proud to be connected with, was actually on the island of Hawaii, the Big Island. And he came and was sent to help the Native Hawaiian parishioners, all throughout those areas. He was already dealing with Hawaiians that were very susceptible to infectious diseases like cholera, smallpox, whooping cough, things like that. And he did his work on the Big Island. we do have some family history that evidence points to the fact that he probably had some interaction with my direct ancestors, which I'm very proud, of while he was on the Big Island. And then, it was during that time that the monarchy was trying to figure out how to deal with leprosy, this disease that no one could understand, that was taking the lives of Hawaiian people, and they didn't know how to deal with it. So they established Kalaupapa. Kalaupapa is aesthetically one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth, and it's still that way today. But it's separated from the rest of that island. It's on the island of Molokai, and it's separated by massive cliffs. It's a little peninsula, on the bottom of massive cliffs, and it really is isolated. You really can't get on or off that place without an arduous, dangerous hike, or by boat, or now by plane. And so it truly is a place that is isolated. And our monarchy sent them there. It's important to know, very important for me to share, that our monarchy sent them there not as, the settlement wasn't to be a penal colony. It wasn't a punishment. It was truly so that the Board of Health, the Royal Board of Health, could figure out how to take care of them. But the reality is, and we have to admit, our kingdom, our monarchy did not have the capability of providing the care that these lepers needed in that area. And we'll get into Queen Liliuokalani later and her role in that later on, and what good she did. But it was around that time, it was Bishop Maigret, Louis Maigret, which the locals called Bishop Louis. He thought it'd be good to have some priests in Kalaupapa to help. And in 1873, they asked for volunteers. And of course, as you can imagine, some of the priests were very, very scared. No one wanted to go at first, but Father Damien, he volunteered. He was the first volunteer, and he went to Kalaupapa at that time when there was between 600 and 700 lepers. And that's where he began to establish, his work there. He established a little church on the darkest side of Kalaupapa, known as Kalawao. They call it the Shadows of Kalawao. I've been there many times, and he created his church, Saint Philomena, and he began his work truly trying to do two things: to give love and care to the most forsaken of our community, and also at the same time, to try to make a life for themselves, to, celebrate important occasions, to have birthday parties, to give them a life, to help them establish farms, to establish economy. And really, many historians, you can look this up, you don't have to take my word for it, many historians think that Damien's arrival really was a turning point for this. He gave the people, the forsaken people of Kalaupapa, hope. And he stayed there. And the short of it is that eventually what happened was there came a point that, Damien continually asked for more resources, and it was very hard to come by. Sometimes it was refused, sometimes it just wasn't available. It was very hard to come by. And eventually, on one of his visits to Oahu, he was told by his superior point blank, if you're getting dangerously close to these people, you either stay here, or if you go back to Kalaupapa, you can never leave the island. And Father Damien, without blinking an eye, chose to go back to live with the residents of Kalaupapa. And he stayed there, and he served them, he loved them, and he did whatever it took. He buried, Jason, one of my favorite stories, even though it's heartbreaking, is there's an area near his church called Kalawao Bay. And the stories, I'm sorry, it's pretty emotional even thinking about the stories of the boats that would be brought from the other islands with those who had leprosy. And the people that were on the boats were so afraid of contracting leprosy that they threw these patients off the boat, like a quarter mile off the shore. And resident after resident accounted how Damien himself, in his cassock and all, would climb down the cliff to Kalawao Bay and swim out on his own to save these people from drowning. And he also got those who didn't make it so that he could bury them and give them a proper burial. He was so loved by the people that during the reign of Kalakaua, the then crown princess, Queen Liliuokalani, and the queen at the time, Queen Kapi'olani, they visited Kalaupapa. And history says that when Liliuokalani saw her subjects and the wretched state where she was in, she fell apart. She couldn't give a speech. She was shaking and heartbroken at what these people were going through. But in all of that, she saw a man in the corner doing whatever it took to take care of them. He looked for no recognition. He just wanted them to have a good life, to be loved and to be cared for. And that was Damien. And in 1881, she, on behalf of King Kalakaua, made him the Knight Commander of the Royal Order of King Kamehameha. Of King Kalakaua, the Royal Order of Kalakaua, Knight Commander of the Royal Order of Kalakaua. And she did it because of the love and the care he provided for our people. And because of that, he was world renowned. He was world renowned. Everyone knew about his story. Eventually, he caught leprosy after serving the residents of Kalaupapa for 11 years. And then he died in 1889. And his story was far and wide. And even great writers like Robert Louis Stevenson and others visited Molokai after his passing and recounted the many stories of the people who he served. And they all knew. And in fact, there's a story of one Protestant minister who criticized Damien because he could have been more careful. He was careless. He could have done it differently. Not questioning his integrity, but questioning his methods. And legendarily, Robert Louis Stevenson, after hearing this, visited Kalaupapa, spent many months there, and then wrote a letter to this minister who was Minister Hyde. And he wrote, if I'm not mistaken, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, he said, "If that the world remember you at all, Mr. Hyde, there will be a day when Damien of Molokai will be named a saint, and you will be remembered in the virtue of just trying to discredit him." And that's a horrible paraphrase, but the point is, everyone around the world.
Yeah, that's gross, isn't it? It's
yeah.
He could have done it better. He could have been more careful. You know what?
Yep.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's something I've always wrestled with the work that I do in my apostolate, that is there a way to do it that's not dangerous or messy or daring? And I'm always being told there is. And then it was that quote from Gerard, that to be in solidarity with the vulnerable is to become as vulnerable as they are. There is no way in 1868 to go to a leper colony and do it any better than Saint Damian did it. It's just absurd. There's no way to go and think you're not going to walk away. I mean, it is hard to contract leprosy, but if he was genetically, I think you have to be genetically predisposed, I believe. That's right. And he was.
That's right.
So that's that.
No, true. And you know what? We have the parallel of that today with the pandemic, the quarantine shutdown, which you lived through here in Hawaii with me. You know, the fact that we were both told by multiple organizations and even our own government that it was irresponsible for us to go out and feed people who were starving, Jason.
Well,
it was ridiculous.
You through your apostolate Kapuna Needs, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is a perfect parallel. How many weeks of food have you delivered to at-risk families?
I can't even count now. It's been since the middle of March. So you're going to have to do the math. Is it almost 4 months, maybe even more now?
Yes. That
we've been doing that. And we have fed, this is a conservative estimate based on the boxes of food, that each box should feed about 5 or 6 people. We have conservatively, a conservative estimate is about 45 to 50,000 people that we've fed.
And I don't want to throw any people that have lawyers consulting them under the bus, but very powerful, well-funded organizations that exist to feed the vulnerable and the needy didn't do anything because they said it was too risky.
That's right. That's right. And when I volunteered, my apostolate volunteered to work without the assistance of some of these organizations, we were criticized for not being safe, for being reckless. But you know what? We did it. No, not one of our volunteers ever got sick. We follow up with every single one of our patients. Not one of them has gotten sick. And like I said, some of them were receiving food from us after not having eaten for 2 or 3 days. Jason, if we did not do it, and no one would have fed them, and if no one would have fed them, many of them would have died. We don't want to believe that kind of stuff happens here in Hawaii, but it does. And we were able to breach that, stand in that breach.
Yeah, you've shared so many stories with me. Can you share one? I mean, there's some that have stuck out. Are there any that you want to share? I know it's a little digression. Yeah. I know we want to talk about Saint Damian, but for so many people listening to this, I'm so glad, by the way, that we're doing the show. This is my first show, after my hiatus because of the move. And it's been heartbreaking for me to leave. So that this gets to be the first show kind of to bridge the Jason Jones Show, moving from Hawaii to Texas, from one state that was a country to another state that was a country. And then to have you speak Hawaiian on the air, and this podcast is heard around the world, and to know that Hawaiian was just heard around the world. Thank you, AOC, for making that possible. But I want to get back. I want to get back to Saint Damian, but so many people listening to this show live lives of charity, and they probably get the same kind of grief. So you were being told by all these big organizations that the responsible thing to do would be to watch Netflix and chill, I guess. But you didn't do that. And share some of the amazing stories that happened with Kapuna Needs.
You know, we did it out of a desire to help those who I realized immediately, because of the legal restrictions on leaving the house, would not be able to have access to their normal groceries, to their normal, way of life as far as, just sustenance. And so that's the reason why we started it. But within a week of our ministry, we realized that there was so much more of a need, and for so many reasons. One story that stood out when you mentioned that was maybe on the 4th or 5th day, I was doing deliveries on my, by myself. I had my van full of food, and we had an address of someone who was requesting some food. And I remember, walking up to the door, maintaining my distance. Remember, I wasn't there to educate them on, anything at all. It was, here's your food. And so I maintained my distance. I had a mask on. I did everything that was going to be practically safe. I stayed 8 feet away, dropped off their food, backed off. And the lady was so grateful. She was in tears. She's saying, said, thank you for not forgetting about me. I needed food. No one's brought me food. It's been a few days since I've had food. And I said, no problem, Auntie. We call everyone that's older than us, that's female, Auntie here. And so we said, no problem, Auntie. And I was walking away because I had to go to my next place. And she asked me, hey, brother, can you stop for a minute? I go, sure. She goes, can you just sit down? And she had me sit on one bench, and she sat apart from me on another bench. And she just wanted to talk, because the thing that was harder for her than the food was loneliness. That she had no one to be around, no one to just converse with. And that really opened my eyes. It broke my heart. I get emotional very easily, Jason, but that moment got me really emotional. And I also realized that it was far beyond just food. People need comfort. They need security. They need a listening ear. They need to know that they are alive and that someone cares. Anyway, that's just one story.
Well, that's a beautiful story. And the ham-fistedness of the government's policies on COVID have led, in Kauai, there was 1 week where there were more suicides in 1 week than in the previous 6 months prior to the shutdown in 1 week.
That's right.
And so we have this kind of loneliness. But if there was somebody that would have saw you talking to this lady, they would have yelled at you to socially distance or something. Yeah, you'll love this, Dallas. My first day the day we landed in San Antonio, I flew in with half my kids. I flew in with Jacob and Isabella. They were upstairs. I ordered on Uber Eats. I ordered Whataburgers. And for whatever reason, it said your order was about to be there. I went downstairs, and right when the order was supposed to be there, it said order canceled. So I went, I saw a homeless guy, shaved head, tattooed, had a black eye. And I thought, this guy literally had tattoos all over his head where he had been shaved. He had a black eye. I thought, man, this guy's having a rough day. I'll go sit down next to him. So I go sit down next to him, and I'm reordering the food on the app. And then the guys started, I'm chit-chatting with the guys, telling me about what a rough week he had and how these guys jumped him and kicked him in the face. I asked him if he liked Whataburger. He said he loved Whataburger. I said, what are we going to get? And then so I ordered him some food. We were sitting there talking, waiting for the food to come. And a guy in a pickup truck slowed down and yelled at me and this guy next to me to socially distance, to stop sitting so close to each other. And I thought, wow. But then let's go back to AOC. That's AOC. From a distance, she is shouting across history about a real human being. Saint Damian was a real human being who had hopes, who had dreams, who had aspirations, who didn't want to get leprosy, who did not want to die young, who had real fears. He knew even if he never caught leprosy, he was never going to leave Kalapapa again. He came from an ocean and a continent and a culture on the other side of the world. he would never see his family again. He would never see his friends. He would never taste the food from his village again. And that was, he knew as a fact, the consequences of that decision. But because of real love, he made that choice. Now, here we go. 140 years later? AOC, a member of Congress, has no concern about the reality of the human being she's talking about. So she's so flippantly, I don't think she really believes or cares if Saint Damian was an instrument. She knew nothing about him, and she didn't care to know. To her, it's just that man, that statue is an instrument of ideology for her to advance her ideology with no thoughtfulness about a real human being, no honor, no dignity, no nobility.
I have to start off by saying this when it comes to AOC's statement. Never mind her statement for a minute. Just about statements like that from her and from others in general. I'm very bothered with this recent trend of what I refer to as cultural appropriation. I actually learned it when speaking with Ben Watson up in D.C. with you, Jason. And this idea of this cultural appropriation, when you have a specific ethnic group that tries to decry, something on behalf of another ethnic group, taking on, what they think this other group should be concerned about, should be worried about, should be mad about. And it's very frustrating to me because in my mind, that is basically, it's a self-refuting because you're doing exactly what you claim to not want to do, which is impose upon ethnic minorities what they should do. Somebody with greater power telling us what to do. And in this situation, did she ever think about just asking Hawaiian people how they felt? Did she ever think about asking if they loved Damien? Did she ever, how about this one? Did she ever ask them if they thought the queen would be a better choice? That's probably shocked her when she realized that, of course, the Hawaiian people would not want their queen in the governmental halls that stole her kingdom, Jason.
Can you explain that? Can you explain about how these two statues are situated at our state capitol and why they are that way?
Yeah, sure. What's really funny is when I first heard about it, before I had to actually log on and read exactly what AOC said, a friend of mine called me and said, oh my goodness, did you hear what AOC said? And he kind of briefly summarized that. But I was under the impression, because it was like 6 a.m. here, that he was referring to our state capitol. And that got me really infuriated. I was about to cancel my day, drive down to the state capitol and protect the
Well, you were picked up all over, by the grace of God. I saw you all over, all these famous people tweeting your comments, which I thought was great.
Right.
So
Yeah. And so at the capitol itself, our state capitol, this is really unique. At first, I thought she just made the most ignorant statement ever, simply because both Damien and the Queen are at our state capitol. Damien is at the front entrance of our capitol. It's a beautiful statue. And maybe if you put in your show notes, Jason, we could put that link to the video I took of those young men dancing hula before his
done
statue.
Deal. Yes, go to the show notes and you'll see these young Hawaiian men dancing in honor of Saint Damian in front of a statue at the Capitol.
That's right. And so he's in the front, and in the back entrance of the Capitol, between the Capitol and Iolani Palace, the great palace of our monarchs, stands the statue of Liliuokalani. What people don't realize is that she's not facing outwards towards, the back parking lot, nor towards the palace. She is facing the Capitol with her hands open. Why is she facing the Capitol? It's because the Hawaiians who put her there with a purpose. She was waiting. She was there staring at the United States Capitol, the American-run Capitol, waiting for her kingdom to be returned to her. That's why she's in the back, in between the palace and the Capitol. That's why she's looking directly at the palace. To this day, our queen waits for her justice. And
so to Native Hawaiians, to put her in the United States Capitol,
oh my goodness,
would be very offensive.
She in 1898, she actually traveled to Washington, D.C. with 31,000 signatures in what we call the Ku'e petition. By the way, 31,000 was a vast majority of the population at that time. So 31,000 Native Hawaiians and Hawaiian nationals signed a petition against annexation. And proudly, I have a copy of that. And proudly, I have many of my direct ancestors who signed that. But she went up there with this monster. They called it either the monster petition or the Ku'e petition. And she delivered it to Congress. And Congress made her promises about how her kingdom and rightful power would be restored. They broke that trust. And now AOC recommends that in the very halls where she was betrayed, they should put her statue. I'm sorry, Jason, never shall my queen be put in the halls of her oppressors. Never.
And AOC, like you said, referring to Benjamin Watson's quote, where she thinks she's standing up against quote unquote white supremacy, she's been captured by it in a way, and that what she's advocating would be unthinkable to Native Hawaiians.
No, and in addition to that, and this is the thing that has caught a lot of my friends off guard when I say this, some of my more liberal Hawaiian, by the way, number one, I specifically sought out the most liberal of my Hawaiian friends, classmates from high school, and I asked them how they felt. First of all, not one of them, of course, has anything negative to say about Damien. None of them even remotely think his statue should be removed. The very, very, very worst response that I heard was, she chose the wrong example, but I love AOC for all these other reasons. Nobody agreed with her on this. And then when I started reminding them that she wanted to put the queen, in there, some people lost it. They lost respect for her because she represented to them exactly what she claims to try to combat, which is, colonial oppression. You don't understand our history. You're speaking on our behalf. And what you're recommending would be to put our queen there would be the ultimate sign or ultimate symbol of colonialism. And you made that recommendation. And AOC, if you did not mean any of that, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you just say sorry?
She never does. She never says sorry. She never does. Does she? Does she ever backtrack?
No, but Hawaiians, us, Jason, Hawaiians, we're pretty chill. If you do something bad, you say sorry. We're like, it's all good. Let's move on. We're very easygoing like that, but she wouldn't do it. And so as it stands, what most Hawaiians heard from all the Hawaiians I've spoken to, especially those who are in the activist movement, what they heard was simply a congresswoman from their oppressor's government trying to oppress them even more. That's what they heard. And I'm not making that up because I had conversations all day with people who feel that way and just feel that even the ones who love AOC say, you know what, maybe you should mind your business. Jason, look at Mauna Kea. Look at Mauna Kea. Do you think Hawaiians are incapable of standing up and representing themselves? We had a worldwide audience with Mauna Kea.
Right, but see, she's a neoliberal, and neoliberals look at authentic grievances as opportunities to acquire power for themselves. So she was just she's been trained in the art of looking for grievances. Hopefully, the most authentic grievances are the most useful for the neoliberals to acquire power. I mean, it's a joke. Look, the defund the police movement began with, they wanted to federalize the police. Do you remember that? It was all about, let's federalize the police. Local police are bad. Let's federalize the police. And then what happens? President Trump sends federal police to restore order where the local police couldn't. And all of a sudden, it was like, get the federal police out of here. They make no sense. Right. There's no rhyme there's no reason. And it's all about acquiring power. And real people don't matter. Real people that are dead, like Saint Damian, you can run him through the mud and call him, or Uniprocera, you can run these people through the mud.
Oh, yeah.
And history cannot be complex. Of course, today is complex, right? The realities that we're living through today are very complex. Don't you think that the realities that Uniprocera and Damien were living and Queen Liliuokalani, don't you think those realities were complex? But no, what they want to do is make history very crisp and clean and become very judgmental. And good guys, bad guys. And they're basing good guys now on bad guys are white and good guys are the oppressed, the other. That's
Jason,
it. That's the narrative.
Right. That's right. And you know what? That frustrates me more than anything that's happened in the recent narratives here, is the fact that they're fueling this feeling that it's white versus not white. It's white versus black, white versus brown, white versus everything. And that, to me, when it comes to, by the way, I respect all cultures. I really do. We are an actual minority.
I lost you, Dallas.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You're good?
Yeah. Mark
All
Zuckerberg
right.
was getting in there trying to push the mute button. Okay,
No,
so who's the actual minority? Hawaiians?
Yeah, Hawaiians are actual minorities. You know, we only have a couple 100,000 of us. We don't have millions of us. I just want to point out that we should have our voices heard when it comes to our issues, not have it be spoken about by a politician or by anyone who we didn't ask assistance from. But the point of that is when you have this continual narrative of, minorities versus white people, even that itself is being fueled by something that doesn't exist. Hawaiians were never racist. We were never racist. And in fact, did you know that under Kamehameha IV, we actually had a law in Hawaii, and this is before the Civil War, that if any Popolo person, which was black, if they made it to the shores of Hawaii, they would be free and they could own land. We were not racist whatsoever. One of Kamehameha I in the late 1700s, his best friend was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed haole guy, which means white. The queen herself, she loved Damien, and it's because she saw the care that he had for her people. It had nothing to do with what color he was. By the way, he was a minority here because he was Belgian. He was not American. He did not speak English as his first language. He himself was a minority among minorities here. But
the Anglo missionaries had a very strong, very vicious anti-Catholic prejudice.
Right.
And is that fair to say? Like that these missionaries carried with them a prejudice that at times erupted into some real big problems.
Oh no, Catholics were persecuted here for it's called the Dark Decade, 1829 to 1839. Hawaiian Catholics here were persecuted. That's a whole other story that does play into that. Point being, Damien was not Hawaiian, nor was he American. He might have had lighter skin, but he was not judged, by his skin color here. My whole point of all of that is it's frustrating when we are led to believe that we have to make decisions and judgments simply based on the color of someone's skin. Jason, Hawaiian people were not a tribe. We weren't a poor little tribe of people. We were a kingdom. You could be a Hawaiian national Jason Jones could have been a Hawaiian national. It didn't matter where you came from or what color you were. And that's the way we ran our kingdom. That's the way we treated our people. And for her to sit up there and to try to speak to an issue which she's uneducated about should be offensive to all Hawaiian people. And that's what she did. She hasn't apologized. And I think it really does go a long way to expose the games of victimization she tries to play. She doesn't really care about what she's saying. She just is looking for the next victimized, a victim that she could try to get involved in her plight. That's why this happened. I don't think she intended. She didn't write this out. I really don't think she wrote this out. But she's walking through the Capitol statuary room, walking through it, in my opinion, with this idea of who can we, use to further our agenda here, sees the statue of Damien and then makes a comment based on a minority which she knows and that she did visit Hawaii once and tries to make something of it. By the way, all the while insulting Native Hawaiians by saying that our queen should be there. We love our queen, no doubt, but not there. You don't put her there. And then also ignoring that you also had King Kamehameha, who was definitely indigenous, definitely not white, definitely did not speak her language, definitely spoke a native language, totally ignored the fact that he was there, and our state put him there as well.
So why is it not offensive that Kamehameha is there?
Well, well, it's not offensive to me because he is the first king of Hawaii. He is, even though it wasn't all through peaceful means, he is the one that brought us to a couple of things. He brought us to a point where he started international relations with people and put us on the right path that by the time of his son, Kamehameha II, we were on our path to being a nation. And by 1843, under King Kamehameha III, Kauikeaoli, we became, and I don't know if your listeners know this, but we became the first non-European based independent country in the world. We were acknowledged by Great Britain, America, and France as an independent nation. We ended up having embassies in 96 countries or areas around the world. We had international treaties with almost every country that existed. We were a full-fledged country, and a lot of that had to do with
the most literate country in the world in less than a lifespan of one person.
That's right. King Kauikeaoli famously said, "He aupuni pala ka'u," which means I have a literate nation. And we, by the 1890s, we had something near a 98% literacy rate. We had a higher literacy rate than any country in the entire world. And really, Jason, I know I'm going off track a little bit here, but something that all people should know, and maybe even AOC should look into, is we have hundreds of thousands of Hawaiian language newspapers going all the way back to the 1830s that share the voice of how Hawaiians felt about things all throughout the 19th century. The problem is since a lot of it wasn't digitized until the last 15 years, only now are we starting to realize what our ancestors thought and felt throughout this whole thing. And number one, you see that Hawaiians were proud to be Christian. They weren't forced into it. They loved their God. They loved, their faith. We also see that they heralded as heroes people who were not their color. They herald many priests as heroes, many visitors that loved Hawaii as heroes. Why, Jason? Is because unlike what the media and what everyone wants to say all indigenous people should feel, we were not racist. It wasn't in our blood to be racist. We knew the difference between Kanaka, which is indigenous, and a visitor, but we judged people on their character and the love they had for our land, not the color of their skin.
And that was in large part because of the gospel being accepted, right, and believed.
Right.
Now,
no, for sure.
Now, can you share with, maybe we can close on this. We'll take AOC's absurd comments, which I agree with you. She didn't write them out. She is in the habit of calumny. She is in the habit of taking everything as an opportunity for politics. They want politics in everything, and they do not care about the truth. It's just an instrument for power. So that is what it is. It's just another one of countless offhanded remarks that are designed, like a college sophomore trying to impress her friends at the coffee shop. That's all that was.
Right.
But you're doing this incredible project where you're working with students to take Hawaiian language newspapers from the 19th century and translating them. Do you want to talk about that? In college and high school students too.
Yeah, no, for sure. So it was actually during the quarantine, one of the silver lining benefits of the shutdown we had here is I had some extra time in the evenings. And so I started to work on translating some Hawaiian language newspapers that have been digitized but have not yet been officially translated. I started working on that, and maybe it was 2 months ago now, I stumbled upon a newspaper written in the late 1860s that was a Catholic Hawaiian newspaper. And I got goosebumps when I saw it. It was really awesome. I asked our diocese as well as the archivist for the Sacred Heart priest, and no one knew. They knew that such a paper existed, but no one had copies of it. So I basically made a discovery for the local church, and we started reading it. Well, as I started reading it, I noticed a few things. First of all, Catholics during that time were proud to be Christian. They were proud to be Catholic. They understood their faith very well. And one of the most beautiful things I found in the very first issue was that they started that newspaper with the intention of giving voice to the Hawaiian people so that Hawaiians could live and display their faith with, in their own voice. So exactly the opposite of what people think happened here. The missionaries were not oppressive. They actually aided the Hawaiians to have their own voice in their faith. And in that first issue, there's a story, or a few issues later, there's a story of the great priest, Father Arsenius Walsh, who was an Irish priest, just like Damien was Damien wasn't Irish, but he was a Sacred Hearts priest like Damien. And it details his story. He had recently passed away. And one of the most beautiful parts was at the end, they wrote beautiful chants and songs in his honor, took up the entire issue. You see, the people loved Arsenius, Father Arsenius, which they called Arcaneo. They loved him, even though he was Irish, for the love that he had for the Hawaiian people, much like Damien. And they wrote songs, they wrote chants, just like Hawaiians wrote songs and wrote chants for their beloved Kamiano. And I highly recommend that all of those who have real fights in the world.
Can I put you? Yeah. I don't know if you have it near you, but you did the chant for me.
Oh, I don't have it near me right now.
Well, next time. When I was at your house, and I was privileged to have you do the chant. You had tears. You were so moved by it, and you had tears in your eyes.
I have it right here. I do want to read that to you because it's so beautiful. So the chant for Father Arakaneo, I'll read it as opposed to actually chant it. But there are some, beautiful, beautiful parts here that just, really, really touch my heart. Ku'umakua, hoa hele o ke alanui, hoa pili o ke kula o pani oi, ho'omaha aku kaua I malululua, inu aku kaua I kawai, o kawai I loko o kohe, kuli aku nana I ka okuokea, ke kahiko mai I na monalane. And there's another line in here, and my favorite line is this line that says, Ku'umakua ala ua ala makani o nu'uanu. That means our precious Father in the winds and the rains of the great Nu'uanu cliffs. And I get goosebumps even saying that now because Hawaiians were so, they embraced Father as part of their culture. So when a Hawaiian dies, Hawaiian mythology and Hawaiian history or Hawaiian culture would say that, of course, as is a very Catholic belief, that our ancestors that die in the love of God are still with us and that they're still present. They're still part of the church, just they're in the church purgative or the church triumphant. And so we realized that was something that completely blended with our culture. So when Father Arakaneo died, they went to the place where he loved the most and they sang this chant. They chanted this chant. They sang this song to say that Father is still with us and we can feel him and hear him every time the rain and the wind fall from Nu'uanu. How beautiful is that?
It's too beautiful. It's too beautiful.
Awesome.
I am so grateful, Dallas. I haven't been very open on my podcast or with folks. I've been keeping it kind of close-chested. It's been leaking out here or there that I was preparing to move from Hawaii to Texas. And as you know, I think your wife witnessed me break down at one point. Mm-hmm. It was really devastatingly hard decision. And to me, my apostolate has always been to live a life in service for the vulnerable, through my family and through Hawaii. That's always been how I saw my apostolate. That was my faith as I came to learn it in Hawaii. And so my apostolate works through my faith, through my family, and through Hawaii. But I realized with this new normal and this never-ending quarantines in Hawaii, that I was no use to my family for my apostolate or for Hawaii. I realized I had to move. I had to make this move to be able to do my job, to market my movies, to do these other initiatives I'm doing. And then the last month as we're preparing to leave Hawaii, I signed on to produce 2 movies about Hawaii. I'm brought on, not projects that I've initiated, but people came to me and said, we want you to be our producer. And then me being on the mainland actually assists these projects even more. And then now to be here in Texas, I'm on the floor, literally sitting on the carpet in a corner. I'm trying to have a place in this Airbnb that has the least echo. And then we're doing a show on Saint Damian and on Hawaii. To me, this is just a blessing. So thank you, AOC. People ask me if it's been bittersweet leaving. And at first it was very bitter. But now it's just sweet because I've come to see that for my apostolate, I have to be where I am right now. And I'll be back. But
well, Jason, you will always be a part of our Ohana. You know that. We love you. We love your family. We miss you already. But I will say that probably one of the silver linings, if there is any, of you not being here, is I don't have to sit in your hot garage doing podcasts anymore.
Okay, I
can do it over the phone.
I think people think I exaggerate about how hot that garage is. My wife thinks I've had heat stroke a few times because I come out looking like I'm about to die and I have to hydrate. How hot is that garage, Dallas?
Oh my goodness. Every time you would ask me to chime in on a podcast, I would begin to sweat no matter where I was, just thinking about how hot it was going to be when I got there.
Yeah, it was hot. I can tell you it was hot.
Very hot.
And now I'll be able to have a nice, it was in a garage. And it's hard to believe that this little podcast we started in my garage now has grown and to reach the world. And I started this podcast to stand with the vulnerable, thinking of the Yazidi, the Chaldeans, the Uyghur, and all the other communities we talk about. Now we see the Uyghur finally erupting onto the mainstream by the grace of God. Never having to imagine I would have to battle for Hawaii, but we really do. Not just this silly attack by AOC on Saint Damian, but we have a real food security problem in Hawaii now. I mean, it's making the press that the outer islands are already experiencing food shortages.
Right, that's right. Hey, I got a update for you. Where I know that before you left, I showed you the beginnings of it, but because of this, eye-opening realization that food insecurity is a real thing here, I decided to take whatever little spare time I have to work on our own family's food security. And we have a fully functional garden and aquaponics, set up now in the backyard. And in fact, I just had my first harvest today. So give me another 6 months and I should be at the point where if we needed to, I could feed the family from the backyard.
Yeah, no, it's really impressive. I mean, I was shocked. Your mom said she was inspired by, I think, my appearance in Alex Jones. And I didn't know your mother's got a real farming background as well.
That's right. Back on the Big Island, that's what we were. We were farmers and fishermen. That was it. There was no other way to get sustenance normally on the isolated part that our family was from. So we would grow and fish for what we ate. And with her guidance and with the guidance of my uncles and some of our older relatives that lived that way growing up, that side of the family just has like this genetic green thumb. So we got some good direction and we'll continue our best. I'm going to do the aquaponics at our school now too, even up at the Benedictine monastery. We're going to try to get a lot of people, as many as we can, independently food self-dependent.
Well, I was impressed. It looked like a professional. That was not just fruits and vegetables. You're raising fish back there.
Oh yeah. That's for sure. And trust me, we're already figuring out how to multiply them and make that part of our normal diet. So we're doing everything we can to
what do you do?
take care of ourselves.
Do you play Otis Redding over the water? What do you do?
Yeah, no, it's been awesome to see this process and get the kids involved as well. I want the kids to know how to feed themselves, and I mean we live in some of the most fertile area on the planet, and it's a shame that I didn't even though I grew up learning how to farm, it's a shame that I haven't tried to get something like this started sooner. But I'm glad sooner, later, better than never, right? And so I'm excited to see where this goes. And I'm going to take a challenge here towards the end of this calendar year to see if at least I could go 2 weeks only living off of the backyard. So I'll let you know, and I'll make a YouTube channel for that when I do that.
Yeah, no, and also, what's the website if people want to support your project, Feeding the Elderly and the Needy in Hawaii?
You can go to kupunaneedsproject.com, kupunaneedsproject.com. And you can go there. It has the links to the various different ways that you can support us. And we're shifting the way that we're doing some things right now, primarily because a lot of us have to go back to work, which is a blessing. That's a good thing. But we don't want our apostolate to stop. So instead of doing many deliveries throughout the day, we're getting other organizations involved to help us deliver. So we bring them a big truck full of deliveries, and then they help distribute it for us. So we're doing our best to transition to that, and we have plans to continue to feed people for the foreseeable future. We're not going to put an end to our service.
Well, let me tell you how impressive it is. When I went to the station at St. Teresa's where you guys were staging, I thought the state had set that up and we were coming just to get food for your apostolate. When I realized, your apostolate, that was your apostolate staging, and the state had nothing to do with it. It was very impressive. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. I'm also going to put the link of the young Hawaiian men dancing in front of the statue of Saint Damian to show their support. And Dallas, thank you very much for coming on the Jason Jones Show. I've only been gone from Hawaii for 48 hours, and I feel a little less homesick already. Just talking.
That's awesome, man. Good talking to you. I'm sure we'll do this again. Enjoy the new home, and send our aloha to your family.
All right. God bless you, brother.
All right, bye.
Aloha. All right, everybody. I'm glad that we had my brother Dallas Carter on the show to address AOC's remarks. By the way, those were not exceptional remarks or out of characteristic. They hit home. It's just another in an endless series of casual calumny that we see from the left about real human beings, complex people who lived in challenging times. And Saint Damian is the model of kindness, courage, nobility, love. Saint Damian, if there's one person we could leave out of this cancel culture, you think it would be Saint Damian. But maybe the silver lining in this is the world will get to hear about Saint Damian, and they'll get to hear about the Kingdom of Hawaii and the culture of Hawaii. And I'm going to do a show this week explaining what's been going on with Movie to Movement. We have a movie coming out in theaters. Not in theaters. We're signing a distribution deal and a theater that will be coming out in several ways in the next couple of months. We also have another movie coming out in the spring, and I have moved to Texas. We're going to talk more about that later this week. It's the Jason Jones Show, broadcasting from Texas, the other state that was a country. More to follow. Go to our website, movie2movement.com, and follow our Vulnerable People Project at thegreatcampaign.org. Until next time, aloha.
This has been the Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.